So now that we've covered how an organism actually, or a potential pathogen actually gets into the body and then sticks around and avoids host cells, now we're going to talk about it actually causing a disease. So some of the virulence factors can contribute to causing tissue damage. So the production of enzymes that you pump out of the cell or toxins that you pump out of the cell can potentially do damage to the cell tissues around them. So extracellular enzymes, or those exoenzymes, are enzymes that are pumped out. And there are some different examples of some that will do damage to tissues or to host defense barriers. So we have mucus that lines our mucous membranes, right? So our lung tissue within our nose. And its whole job is to sort of trap bacteria. And then, if you get exposed to anything foreign or weird, then you release it, right? You sneeze, or you blow your nose, or you cough, and whatever was trapped in there is now expelled from the body, right? But if the bacteria can produce enzymes that are pumped out of the cell, it can do damage to things like the mucous membranes. So mucinase, keratinase, collagenase, hyaluronidase, these are all enzymes that are produced by the bacteria that can then do damage. Some can also react with parts of the blood. Right? So there are enzymes that can be used by the bacteria. They also can create chemicals that they pump out of the cell that are poisonous or do damage to other organisms or to the cells around them. And these are bacterial toxins. So toxigenicity is your power to actually produce those toxins. Toxinosis is the types of diseases that are caused by toxins. And then toxemia is a toxinosis in which the toxin is spread by the blood. So whenever you say the emia, that particular means that that toxin is being spread within the blood. All right, so the bacteria is now in, and it starts to produce these factors that lead to damage within the tissue. The host tissues become weakened, and if the immune system is not able to fight it off, or it's not treated, then over time more and more damage can be done. And it can lead to cell death and tissue death, which is called necrosis. Right? So what are some of these warning signs that you have the infection? So there are either signs or symptoms, and there is a difference between the two. A sign is actually some sort of objective evidence that's noted by an observer, whereas a symptom is something that's subjective, that is sensed by the patient or is described by the patient. So for example, if a sign of an infection could be that you have a fever, so you have an elevated temperature. That's something that's noted by the observer, or it can be measured by a medical physician or by another person. Whereas the symptom that would describe a fever is, you get the chills, or you have body aches, or you feel warm. So that is the difference between the signs and the symptoms. But all of the signs and the symptoms come together, and they define a syndrome, or completely describe a syndrome. Right, so some other examples of signs versus symptoms. So I said fevers and chills, but other signs could be like elevated white blood cell counts, swollen lymph nodes, like the appearance of pus or abrasions, listening to chest sounds. So these are all signs. And then symptoms are, weakness, a headache, nausea, tiredness, sore throat. Those are all symptoms that a patient would experience. Now, a common indicator or result of an infection is a process of an inflammation, which is actually your immune system effectively trying to fight off this foreign organism. And along comes with it some pain and soreness and swelling. But all of that stuff, to keep in mind that is actually a result of what your immune system is doing. It is not because of the bacteria causing any sort of damage discharge or infection. It's because of how your immune system is responding. So edema, swellness, the swollen lymph nodes, these are all even like pus and abscesses like at the location of an infection. These all have to do with your inflammatory response. And again, when we cover immunology, we'll go really into details about that and you'll understand where it comes from. All right, so your white blood cells are responsible for fighting off infections. So a lot of times to sort of diagnose that somebody has an infection going on, they'll just do a white blood cell count. And if they notice that you have elevated white blood cell counts, then they know that your immune system must be actively trying to fight off an infection. Now, a lot of times what your immune system is doing is it's trying to, not only kill the organism or the infecting pathogen, but it's also trying to keep it isolated within one location in the body and prevent it from moving around. If that infection is able to spread to the blood, that is called septicemia, when we have microorganisms that are in the blood, and that's really dangerous. Now, we have to keep in mind that a lot of times you might have infections or things that are going on that possibly could be asymptomatic. Like there's nothing going on that you can actually effectively feel to diagnose that. All right, so another thing about causing an infection is the fact that you need to, if you are a pathogen, especially if you're a true pathogen, you're going to need to go from, or you are going to go from and spread from host to host. So somehow then you need to get out of the body and be able to spread and go to some other place. So this is sort of the opposite of the idea of portal of entry, but it's the portal of exit. So I mentioned coughing and sneezing, but it also can be in your urine or in your blood or in like open wounds in your skin, insects, human feces. So these are all different ways in which the pathogen could vacate the host and then potentially go find another host. So again, this is just sort of repetitive, but you've got your respiratory and salivary portals, so in mucus and saliva, on your skin, fecal, any sort of your genital discharges, or blood can cause the movement of these pathogens. Now, sometimes the pathogens don't need to move, but they can stay within the body and they can persist within the body for long periods of time without causing a lot of damage. So in this case, a lot of times what will happen is you have this dormant state or these periods of latency where the bacteria aren't active or the virus is not active, and it goes into a dormant state, but then you can have these sort of outbreaks if maybe you become immunocompromised or they become opportunistically pathogen, maybe like it has favorable conditions in which you have an outbreak. So examples of this are like herpes outbreaks or obviously AIDS as a result of HIV being within the body for a long period of time. All right, in the last video on this lecture, I'm going to actually talk about where pathogens come from in our environment and the study of how pathogens are transmitted in populations and the effects that they have on the body, which is called epidemiology.